You read earlier that longer account from Matthew's Gospel of the resurrection of Jesus. 50 days afterwards, the disciples were together on the day that we call Pentecost. And God came amongst them by his Holy Spirit in a powerful, a remarkable way. And in the kerfuffle that followed, one of the disciples, Peter, speaks to the crowd. This is Peter, who was Jesus' close friend, Peter who was witness to all that he'd done in his life, Peter who had been present when Jesus was arrested and tried, Peter who had seen the risen Jesus on Resurrection Day, on that first Easter. Peter had run to the tomb and found it was empty. Well, he's speaking 50 days later, like I said. I'm going to start reading Acts 2 and verse 22. Fellow Israelites, listen to this. Jesus of Nazareth was a man accredited by God to you, by miracles, wonders, and signs which God did among you through him, as you yourselves know. This man was handed over to you by God's deliberate plan and foreknowledge. And you, with the help of wicked men, put him to death by nailing him to the cross. But God raised him from the dead, freeing him from the agony of death, because it was impossible for death to keep its hold on him. David said about him, I saw the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand, I will not be shaken. Therefore my heart is glad and my tongue rejoices. My body also will rest in hope, because you will not abandon me to the realm of the dead. You'll not let your Holy One see decay. You've made known to me the paths of life. You'll fill me with joy in your presence. Fellow Israelites, I can tell you confidently that the patriarch David died and was buried, and his tomb is here to this day. But he was a prophet and knew that God had promised him on oath that he would place one of his descendants on his throne. Seeing what was to come, he spoke of the resurrection of the Messiah, that he was not abandoned to the realm of the dead, nor did his body see decay. God has raised this Jesus to life, and we are all witnesses of it. So we're focusing in here on these words that Peter, one of the disciples, one of the eyewitnesses of Jesus, spoke on the day of Pentecost. Just a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 or so weeks ago, we looked at that whole event. We were going through the book of Acts, and we looked at the events of the day of Pentecost. So I'm not going to talk about the occasion. I'm not going to summarize his whole sermon, but I just want to press into this kind of little detail out of his message, just a couple of lines. And in these lines, we're going to see something about Jesus. Jesus of Nazareth, a man accredited by God to you by miracles, wonders, and signs. He was handed over to you by God's set purpose and foreknowledge, God's plan. And God raised him from the dead, freeing him from the agony of death, because it was impossible for death to keep its hold on him. 3 things that God did then in Jesus. God showed him, God handed him, and God raised him. This is the very first time that the early Christians, the early church, had ever kind of proclaimed the message of Jesus. The first time they'd ever kind of preached about the resurrection of Jesus. It's worth noting that the first time they come to talk about Jesus in public, they absolutely center on his resurrection, this awesome, this unique, this world-changing event. I hope as you've come here over the weeks, months, years, you've seen something of Jesus. I hope as if you've read a Bible, if you've listened to things about Jesus, you've picked up something about him. That's the great aim that we have as a church here. That's my job, is to introduce you to Jesus, to show you something about him. And as you've seen him, as you've looked at him, I wonder what it is that you've been struck by. Is it the kind of wisdom that there is in his words? or the power that he displays in his actions, the gentleness, the kindness of his heart, his love. Have you ever wondered, well, why? Why did he do what he did? What did it accomplish? What did it mean? I hope we'll see that this morning. The first thing that Peter says here that we're interested in is that God showed him. Peter says that miracles and signs and wonders, the incredible things that Jesus did, were God's way to accredit him. That was true. They showed off what kind of person he was. They showed his compassion. They showed his kindness. They showed his concern. But they had a bigger purpose. God did it to accredit him, we're told. What does it mean to accredit something? Well, if I took off my wedding ring, I would find stamped inside some little marks, hallmarks, signs that a thing is genuine. Hopefully Rose won't look inside hers because there aren't any. No, there are signs something is genuine, that it's the real deal. That they're authentic, that they show where something is from. And the acts that Jesus did were to authenticate him, to accredit him, to prove that he's genuine, to show that he's real. The mighty acts that God performed through Jesus show who he is, show that he's come from God. Jesus speaks and acts with all the authority of God. Jesus speaks and acts with all the authority of God. And that is the purpose of the signs and the wonders. They show who he is. And if that's who he is, that Jesus speaks and acts with all the authority of God, if the miracles prove that, that makes the next bit so shocking. Because Jesus, God himself, taken on human form, Jesus, the glorious, kind, beautiful, powerful, incredible, unique individual, was, verse 23, handed over to you. God accredited him, showed him, but then God handed him over. He was handed over to you, we're told, by God's set purpose and foreknowledge. In other words, God planned it out in advance. Peter makes it very clear that the death of Jesus isn't an accident, isn't some kind of terrible tragedy, isn't a kind of political miscalculation, isn't just some kind of natural cause and effect from the disturbance that he created. No, it's clear that there's human guilt here, there's human involvement, there's human responsibility. You, with the help of wicked men, put him to death. But something else is going on behind the scenes. This man was handed over to you. It is part of God's plan. Maybe sometimes you ask yourself, why do bad things happen to good people? It's a question a lot of people have. It's a question Alice and I were just talking about this week, that one of his friends was asking. What about evil? What about suffering? Why are these things allowed? People wrestle with these questions, don't they? You, because you've been through suffering, ask that question. Why do bad things happen to good people? Well, I can answer it in general terms. I can answer it and explain that look, this world is messed up and broken. That God made the world good. And yet because of human rebellion, human wrongdoing, what we call sin, that's damaged us. And that's damaged the world. That's left us living in this mess. That explains in general terms why there's suffering, why bad things happen. That's a general answer to the problem of where suffering comes from. It's not a specific answer. I can't say to you why this particular bad thing happens to this particular person. Can't answer that. I wouldn't dream of trying to do so. But you know that on Good Friday at Easter, we see the ultimate bad thing happening to the ultimate good person. That the Son of God, the pure, sinless, spotless Son of God himself, is nailed to a cross, executed as a criminal. And whilst I can't say why all sorts of other bad things specifically happen, I can tell you that this bad thing happens by a deliberate plan. By the action of God himself. Why? In order to undo the consequences of our rebellion. In order to undo evil. So that one day there will be no more suffering and no more mess and no more brokenness and no more bad things. Jesus, who was innocent of all wrong, was condemned as a criminal and punished. He paid back what he hadn't stolen. He cleared our debts. God showed him. God handed him. But then God, we learn, raised him. This is the climax of Peter's message. This is the whole point. This is what he's been working up to. If you forget everything else that he's been saying, more importantly, you can remember what he said, but if you forget what I'm saying, remember this: God raised him. God raised Jesus from the dead. And I understand how ridiculous that sounds on one level. Because you know, as did people in the first century, that when you're dead, you're dead. We're not saying that things like the resurrection happen. We're saying the resurrection of Jesus happened. That it is unique. That it's a one-time only event. That it changes everything in the entire cosmos. Death is universal. Death faces all of us sooner or later. Peter speaks here about God freeing him from the agony of death. The agony of death. Not just kind of physical suffering, because physical suffering, of course, ends at death. He's saying that there's something bigger. There's something that's not right about death. There's something violent about death that cuts across God's good intentions for human beings. You know, as you've stood at the graveside of people you loved, whether they were young and taken far too early, whether they were older and lived rich, full lives, you know that there's something not right about it. The fear of death has kept us locked up indoors alone for a year, hasn't it? But what if God's power was greater than death? Was able to free us from the agony of it? Was able to undo the curse? Eddie Izzard, the comedian, in a very poignant interview back in 2017 in The Guardian, speaks of the awful grief of a child, 6-year-old, losing a mother. Says this: everything I do in life is trying to get her back. I think if I do enough things, that maybe she'll come back. It's awful to read. The interview goes on to say this: I have a very strong sense that we're only on this planet for a short length of time, and that is only growing. Religious people might think it goes on after death. My feeling is that if that is the case, it would be nice if just one person came back and let us know it was all fine, all confirmed. Of all the billions of people who've died, if just one of them could come through the clouds and say, you know, it's me, Janine, it's brilliant, there's a really good spa, that would be great. It would be great, wouldn't it? And that is why we've gathered here this morning. To Eddie and to all those who face the grief of losing loved ones, we say, of all the billions of people who've died, there is one. There is one who has come back. And not just to say that it's brilliant, there's a star, but to say the one who says, I'm going ahead of you to prepare a place for you. And I'm going to come back and take you to be with me. He's gone through death. He's a faithful, trustworthy guide. We can commit ourselves to him. We can lean on him. He will bring us through. The Bible teaches us that death wasn't God's original design. Death, says the Bible, is for sinners. Let me explain what I mean there by a sinner. What is sin? Sin is human rebellion against God. It's every moment that you or I have thought we knew best, knew better than God. It's everything we did in this world that he made without even thinking about him. It's every unkind word we've spoken. It's every lie we told. It's every selfish act. It's every time we take the credit for things that he has done or gifted to us. That's what we mean by the word sin. And the Bible tells us that the consequence of sin, the wages, the thing that just kind of goes along with it that you can't escape, the result of sin is death. Sin comes into the world. Death comes into the world because of sin. And if Jesus, when he died, just remained dead, like everybody else does, there would be nothing special or unique about him. He would be the same as every other human being since the beginning of time. But I said earlier on that Jesus was condemned as guilty, but he wasn't. That he was sinless, he was spotless, pure, not guilty. But death goes along with sin. Death follows guilt, but he wasn't guilty. And therefore death has no power over him. Death can't hold on to him. He's not its legitimate prey. It was impossible, says Peter, for death to keep its hold on him. Well, that's all very interesting. It's a nice diversion on a sunny Sunday morning, but what difference does it make? What difference does it make to you or to me? Well, the Bible makes it very clear that by faith in Jesus, belief in him, we are joined to him. This idea of union with Jesus Christ. And by being joined to him, his death on the cross counts for us. And so our debt, our penalty is paid. We get counted as clean, as perfect as he is. We receive forgiveness. We're joined to him so that as he is raised to new life, we receive a new spiritual life here and now, but also the future hope that one day we will be raised with him. How does that happen? What does faith in Jesus look like? I mean, that's a wonderful promise, isn't it? To be counted as clean, to have the slate wiped away. Those things that you've never told anyone, but you hold on to them and they're barbs in your soul that you would love to be able to wash away, and you know you can't. To have them wiped out, gone. To have the hope of life with God eternally after death, to be raised anew. Glorious promises, but I said it comes from faith in Jesus, being joined to him. Well, how does that happen? What does faith in Jesus look like? Well, I think there are kind of different elements in that. There are different parts. I'd say that they usually come in this order. First off, there's an awareness that we're not right. That when I use this word sin, wrongdoing, the awareness that it applies to me too. That I'm out of step with God. And that I'm under then his just sentence, death. And also then there's an awareness that however hard I try, can't do anything about it myself. I have tried. And I keep doing the same things I said I'd never do again. And also there's an awareness then of God. Not just God because I'm out to step with him because I've done wrong, but more than that, but an awareness of God's unfailing love towards me. To realize that Jesus Christ lived and suffered and died because he loved me so much that he would give himself to rescue me. And if I then grasp this heart of his, this tenderness of his love, that he would act like that towards me, that he would be willing to hear me when I call on him, that he is more willing to reach out to me than I am to call on him. If I would grasp that, and then I would turn towards him and I would say, God, Lord Jesus, have mercy on me. I'm a sinner. That's it. That's what I mean when I say to put faith in Jesus and be joined to him. That's what the Bible calls a child of God, a Christian. Someone who says, I can't do this myself. I haven't done this myself. But Jesus has. And Jesus will. There's a line from a U2 song that always pops up on my Facebook feed this time of year because I've got a friend who's good at sharing it. It says this: the rule has been disproved, the stone, it has been moved, the grave is now a groove, all debts are removed. Oh, can't you see what love has done? As we face death, we do so certain that Christ has gone ahead of us, that he's conquered the grave, that one day he will raise us. Jesus has taken the sting out of death. It's lost its final power. Forgiveness for sins, new life in Jesus, the promise that death won't have the last word. That is the Christian's great hope. It all comes in and through Jesus. It's why we gather on Easter Sunday. It's why we love to sing of the great hope that we have. Jesus has done this for us. Can't you see what love has done? Father, we thank you for the love of Jesus. We thank you for his tender heart towards us, his desire to come near to us. More willing to come to us than we are to ask him. Lord, I pray that you'd work in us this morning so we'd see something of our need of him and we would call on him. Yeah, for the first time or the 100th time, Lord, to cry to Jesus today. Amen. Well, friends, we're going to step outside and we're going to sing a last hymn.